Hey, this is Chris, and I've been getting questions from people on our online website, and one of them was, how do I make something look realistic? And it's not one answer, it's many answers. But I think the biggest thing that you as an artist could grasp and take a hold of is you tell me where to look, not the photograph. Though your eye may see a spot in the photo that you go right to, it may not be important for you to tell your story. So I'd like to talk about losing and finding an edge. Now, this is a very confusing topic, and we have many videos online to try to explain this, and I'm trying to make another because it is confusing. So let's start. So it starts with a piece of charcoal. So I'm just going to lightly just kind of smear some charcoal down. And one of the things that you have to realize also right away is this texture is a form of attention getter. So there's different elements of art: color, contrast, pattern, texture, and shape. That's texture. So sometimes you can take a cotton ball, two or three cotton balls, and put it in a nylon piece of a material and touch very lightly, and then just smear it to flatten it out. Now, if I press too hard, it embeds into the paper, and then I can't erase. I want to erase, so now I'm going to do it again, change directions, but not go too dark. And again, I'm just dusting it. That's much better. The paper I'm using is Strathmore 300 series sketch paper because I feel like it allows me to do some sketches to work out the problems in my painting, and it also erases. The higher quality papers, the 400 and 500 series charcoal paper, does not really allow you to erase. You really have to know what you're doing and have already worked out your sketches. And I think this is getting close enough. I think we're ready to go. I am going to get rid of the lines on the edges so it doesn't attract attention. That's just a little OCD in me. Okay, so just afraid it's not quite dark enough. Let's start. So one of the most important things is Contrapposto, and it's an S-curve, and it actually starts with early Greek classical painting and antiquities. During the Italian Renaissance, people like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo start to discover all these sculpture pieces, and they start to see it, and they start to implement it into their art, and it's part of this rebirth, which is a bigger category, and we go into it with art history in another video. So I don't want to labor into that, and I just want to stay right where we're at here. Contrapposto basically has many different definitions. One of the definitions is that one leg has all the weight on it and the other leg is at rest, and the impression is it creates movement. Well, there's another definition that sort of goes with it, and that is to get your eye to go from one side of the body to the other, because that's what Leonardo does with Mona Lisa. He gets you to look at he gets you to look at one side and then the other side and the other side. And that movement creates that something just happened. I just turned my head and I'm looking at you. So let me show you how this works. So one way would be if I was to draw in the whole figure, and I'm looking at the Venus DeMilo, and I was to draw in the Venus DeMilo, and she's doing this, you know, and her shoulder's way up here, and it's kind of going like this. And here is Venus. I'm going to talk like I know her. We were friends a long time ago. That's how old I am. And you know, the hip is coming this way, and there's a swagger to her. And the knee is coming out. And she's going like this. And in essence, you're trying to get the viewer to look at this side, and then somehow this side, and then the knee down here, and then down to the foot. And it's as if you drew a line down here and you went from here to here to here to here. That means these other areas have to go. Well, what if I did it a different way? What if I took an eraser and I just said, I'm going to make her stand out on the left side of her, and I'm going to just draw the left side of her, and I'm not going to do the right side at all. And this might be a better way to explain lost and found. That's really what we're talking about here. Lost and found edges or areas. This eraser is too big. Okay. So then I'm going to bring attention to this side of her hip right here and the material. And it's going to lead you to her knee on the other side. And I'm just going to blend it out. And then lead you to her foot. So I'm trying to get you from the left side to the right side and then to the left side again. And that line is lining up with the side of her head, so it's out here farther. So what you're doing is you're telling the viewer, look here, but don't do anything here. Leave it blank. Now, for some artists, they have a hard time doing that, so they want to see a semblance of what's there. Just make sure the difference between the figure and the ground, and we'll talk about that in another video, the object and the surrounding area has less attention than this area. Then as I come here, I'm going to go to the fold and I bring this around and this fold that comes this way. Now be careful as I go over here to this side of her hip, I don't want to make this come forward as much, or I feel like something's missing, like it's a little out of whack. And I don't know if, I'm wondering is, do I find it higher, then not so much lower, and then I come across to her shoulder here. And then I bring you down to this shoulder here. And all of a sudden now I'm starting to see an S-curve much more powerful, and I'm starting to like it. Okay, I do like her hip here. So do I jump to the hip? Pretend my drawing's off. Do I jump to the hip here? And I find this part of her hip. But what am I going to do to get you to the other side? And that's where I could say, okay, so now I'll do the drapery, but the drapery, what you want to do is you don't want to bring attention to the drapery where you're finding both sides. You really want to make sure when you bring attention to this area, it's lower than this point. So the drape here, if it does start higher, at least has to come lower when you bring attention to the white in this area. So your eye is pulled down. So the whole idea is to pull the eye in these directions, and you're telling me where to look. And then from the drapery, you're going right here to the knee. And then as you go to the foot right here, and you start to see this little S-curve move through the painting. The hard part of the painting is when I start to draw it in and I start to say, okay, well, it's time to put in her back, and it's trying to put in the other side, and it's time to put in her neck, and then the other part of her head, and all of a sudden I found the whole thing, and you lost your movement. So I understand that you understand the S-curve. I understand you understand that contrapposto, and you bring attention to certain areas. The problem comes when you start working on the drawing or painting more and more and more. And what happens with that is you lost your S-curve. Now, what goes on in these areas? What do you put in these areas? These are tools, and that's another video.